One of the most important questions to ask is, when does life begin? At conception, when the sperm fertilizes the egg? First heartbeat? First state of consciousness? We ask this question because we believe that life has value. To say when human life begins is to say when human value, worth, and dignity begins. We have a term for this: personhood. When is the value of a person present? To answer this question, meet the Ovitz family. The Ovitz family was a Hungarian Jewish family of traveling actors and musicians known all over Romania, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia. At the height of World War II, the Ovitz family was arrested and taken to Auschwitz, where they caught the attention of Hitler's most notorious medical doctor, Joseph Mengele, also known as the Angel of Death. Mengele put the Ovitz family through horrific experimentation and torture to better understand genetic mutation in hopes of creating a healthier, superior race. Mengele's actions were morally repulsive to the global community, but his premise for assigning value to life was not. In fact, his metric for assigning human value was widely accepted in the medical world of that time. The premise was that human value was determined by development. The value of personhood was not inherent in the person. If a person was mentally or physically underdeveloped, they were less valuable. The more underdeveloped a person was, the more unhuman they were. While most today advocate for the equal treatment of the physically and mentally handicapped, their premise for determining personhood is the same as Joseph Mengele. The dignity of life is not inherent, but based on development. The baby in the womb must meet certain developmental criteria to achieve value. Consider these four common arguments used to connect human value to development. We could express them in the acronym SLED. The S in SLED stands for size. Many will argue the fertilized egg cannot be human because it is so small. Or they might say, a 12-week embryo can't be an actual person, it's only 2 inches. In this statement, what is the premise for personhood? Well, it's size. But is the quantity of our biological mass a reliable metric for determining personhood? What if a premature baby, no bigger than a man's hand, were placed next to the 7-foot 1-inch, 325-pound Shaquille O'Neal? If size is a reliable metric, there would have to be a difference in value. Just a few thought experiments show how absurd it is to determine personhood by size. The L stands for level of development. Many will argue the unborn are extremely undeveloped. They don't have a heartbeat until 3 weeks. They don't have brain waves until 6 weeks. Do we really consider them a person before a heartbeat and brain waves? In this statement, what is the premise of personhood? Well, it's mental and physical development. Value is only granted when the heart and brain operate. If this is an absolute standard, then anyone who has an underdeveloped heart or brain is, to some degree, subhuman. Anyone who has a pacemaker, brain injury, and mental illness is subhuman. And what about someone who has had a heart transplant? Has their personhood been reconfigured or jeopardized? Needless to say, when worth is determined by development, we have just relayed the foundation for history's darkest chapters. Perhaps the strangest standard for personhood is the E, environment. Some will actually argue a child is not a person until they're outside the womb, that is, in a different environment. This defines personhood based on location. It also assigns the birth canal with magical, life-giving, personhood-imputing power. There's a reason why most people don't resort to this argument. And the last argument is D, It is a far more common argument. It stands for degree of dependency. Many will argue, how can you say an embryo is a person, since they're dependent on their mother for everything? What is the premise of personhood in this argument? Well, it's dependence. But if personhood is truly defined by dependence, then what about the person dependent upon dialysis, an oxygen machine, a pacemaker? To argue the value of personhood based on size, level of development, environment, or dependency is to create a sliding scale that is impossible to apply with any scientific or rational consistency, unless we are prepared to downgrade the personhood of the underdeveloped and handicapped. So when does life begin? At what point is personhood present? There is only one possible standard that treats all human life as equal and sacred. This is the point of conception. The moment a sperm fertilizes the egg, there is a visible spark, a puff of light, and in that moment you possess your own personal, unique DNA. Your DNA is the complete package of you. In that moment, you have everything you need. All that's left is nourishment and development. Perhaps that's why standard medical textbooks like Biology of Gestation, written by Dr. Louis Friedhandler, refers to fertilization as that wondrous moment that marks the beginning of life for a new, unique individual. Quotations like this abound in standard medical textbooks because it is a biological fact that life begins at conception. Think about it. About every 7 years, almost every cell in your body completely replaces itself. Yet, you are not a different person. Why? Because you are the same genetic person. A soldier could come back from war totally disfigured, yet their personhood would remain in all its worth and dignity. Size, physical and mental development, degree of medical dependence has no effect on their worth as a person. But your unique DNA is not the whole story. DNA might explain the unique biology of personhood, but it doesn't explain why that person has value. This is because science can only tell us the what, not the ought. It tells me what the DNA is and does. It does not tell me that we ought to treat this human life as valuable. Yet we intuitively know that human life has value. When we attend a funeral, we don't behave like our computer crashed. We know this unique person had transcendent value that gave their life meaning. There's a reason we'd be morally repulsed by a mother who chose to save her cat from a burning building instead of her daughter. In fact, we cannot begin to have a just society without an unflinching commitment to human worth and equality. But where does this value come from? Biology alone can't explain it. Once again, we find that the Bible explains it with ease. Human value is based on our being made in the image of God. Genesis 1:27 says, God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. While the scriptures don't map out the double helix, it does clearly trace this value back to life in the womb. Israel was unique in the belief that the child in the womb was sacred. The nations surrounding Israel were known for performing child sacrifices and placing little to no value on children in the womb. In stark contrast, when David reflected on God's intimate care and concern for him, his thoughts went to his formation in the womb. Psalm 139, 13 through 16 say, For you formed my inward parts. You wove me in my mother's womb. I will give thanks to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. By using the word fearfully, he's saying the way he was created was so awesome and incredible, it actually strikes fear in the heart of the observer. David goes on, Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the depths of the earth. Your eyes have seen my unformed substance. In your book were all written the days that were ordained for me, when as yet there was not one of them. Job is one of the most tragic figures in the Bible. All his children were killed and his wealthy estate demolished. His wife told him to curse God and die. As Job was reminding God of his love for him, he thought of his creation in the womb. He says in Job 10:8-12, "Your hands fashioned and made me altogether, and would you destroy me? Remember now that you have made me as clay, and would you turn me into dust again? Did you not pour me out like milk and curdle me like cheese?" Job is referring to the beginning biological process where you started basically as biological liquid and slowly formed like curdled cheese. "Did you not clothe me with skin and flesh, and knit me together with bones and sinews? You have granted me life." These ancient biblical authors saw their life in the womb as proof of God's amazing love. From conception, they reflected the glory and dignity of God. Answer this question honestly. What difference would it have made for the Ovitz family if Joseph Mengele suddenly became persuaded that human value is not determined by development, but by the image of God at conception? It would have made all the difference in the world. And the truth is, it would make the same difference for the 62+ million children aborted in the womb since Roe v. Wade. God is the source of all of life, but He is also the source of all truth about all of life. Psalm 36:9 says, "For with you is the fountain of life. In your light we see light."